quails' eggs are just stunning. I mean, look at them. No two are the same. Some have got all over patterns, some are shiny, some are matte. So if you can find a supplier, they are just brilliant as inspiration. If you can't, of course there will be pictures on the internet, but there's nothing nicer than actually feeling and handling the eggs. And they make the most cute, sweet, beautiful little fried eggs when you finish painting them. What I want to show you is some ways of painting eggs, these lovely quails' eggs. The reason I think eggs are so brilliant to paint are well, one, we can learn about colour mixing and getting really muted, lovely grey colours. Second, it teaches us about controlling the water to get a really lovely round feel to our eggs and having a lovely underwash. And then the third thing is that we can make the patterns and the speckles in lots of different ways. And I'll show you from painting them in, spattering them in onto dry, using watercolour pencils and sandpaper. This is Brusho sprinkled into wet, and this is spattered into a damp egg, and we can combine all those. So just quickly on the colour, if you mix colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel, you will get a neutral or a more greyish colour. Purple and yellow, here I've got Quin gold and Diox purple. Together, actually they make a brownie, lovely rich brownie colour. This is Viridian and alizarin mixed together, and they make a really lovely purpley grey when they mix. And then French ultramarine and burnt sienna, well actually it's Quin sienna, makes a really good dark. If you only mix a tiny bit, it just neutralises the colour. So here over on the Viridian, it's really blue green, really strong. Mix in a tiny bit of red and you'll knock out some of that strength. This painting, because I looked at these eggs and they've got a lot of gold in them, I thought I would use this colour combination, so I'm using Quin gold and Diox purple. You could reach for a ready-made burnt umber, Van Dyke brown, whatever you've got. You know, it's entirely up to you, but that's what I've chosen to do. I've got a piece of knot or cold press watercolour paper that's roughly 30 by 30. It's £140, and I have drawn out a design of eggs. And let me show you the easiest way I know of drawing eggs. You need a circle, obviously appropriate to the size of egg you fancy doing. I'm doing this in pen so you can see, but draw the midline and extend it a bit, and then work out from your egg roughly how much taller it is than it is wide, and this is 1.5 I would guess. So I'm working out the length there. Now gulls' eggs are long and thin, owls' eggs are virtually spherical, so you know, do look and don't just assume. And then that marks the length of this particular egg. So then all I have to do is an arc like that, and I usually find it easier to turn the paper round, and an arc like that, and I've got my egg. I can then rub out all the inside lines. I mean, if I haven't got the arc right, obviously I can make sure that both sides match up. If you can't do that, loads of templates on the internet, so just Google one and you'll get an egg shape. I've measured everything out pretty carefully because I want this to be a really regular pattern, and now I'm going to start painting the shells. Eggshells are really smooth, they don't have wrinkles, but they do, if we pop one there, usually have a lovely highlight. So I've mixed together a little of my Quin sienna and my dioxazine purple to make that really rich brown. And there's two ways that I like to paint the eggshells. I just put a line of colour round the outside, and then with clean water I smooth that away so that it naturally gets lighter in the middle. I want to save my highlight, so I'm using a thirsty brush, which is a damp brush that I've taken, clean damp brush, I've taken off the moisture, and then I can just pull away the colour in the middle. But say you're working in a really hot climate and everything's going to dry too quickly and you'll end up with a hard edge around the side. The second option is to pre-wet the entire egg and then drop your colour in round the side, and you can see that spread really quickly. Then again, with your clean damp brush, you can just smooth it round. I could lift off some of the middle if it had all spread too far to get that highlight and smooth it out. Or I could use my thirsty brush. So 2 different options for painting my eggs. Right, I've got 19 to do, so I think we'll fast forward this. Right, the first layer is dry. Always check by using the back of your hand. If it still feels cool, there's water in there. And now, don't panic at all if your washes aren't smooth or some of the highlights are a bit blobby or you've mucked up the edge of one of your eggs. We can sort it out at this point. If you've mucked up an edge, get a little short flat brush, make sure it's clean, and then just sort of tickle the edge, use a bit of kitchen towel, and you can sort that out very easily. If you haven't got enough of a highlight, or you've done something like, I don't know, putting the highlights coming from the different direction, which actually I think I probably have, so highlight should be more on the fat end of these if I'm thinking the light's coming. Again, we'll use that little short flat brush, and on the dry we can just lift out a little of the paint to get a soft highlight. We don't want a hard highlight because eggs aren't usually shiny, so we can just pull out a soft highlight like that and smooth any edges if we felt that our highlights were a little harsh. It's always worth looking at a real egg and just seeing how the light does fall on it. Make sure that you're not making any assumptions, because it's terribly easy to think, oh, I know what an egg looks like, for goodness sakes. When you're happy with that first layer, guess what? We do it all over again to get more roundness and more depth. Then you want it to dry thoroughly and make sure you get rid of any pencil lines, and again just adjust some of your highlights if they need to. If at this point some of your eggs are looking a little more like potatoes than eggs, don't panic. The speckles cover a multitude of sins, thank goodness. So we're going to let that dry and then it's speckle time. So I've got my base layer of colour there. And of course you could do another layer if you really want to build up the depth of that colour, but I reckon 2 are fine. And then we've come to speckles. We can paint them on, wet on to dry. We could spatter them if we want to. This is using watercolour pencils and a little bit of sandpaper. This one is a sprinkle of Brusho, I'll show you, and this one is a spatter into a damp area. Now I think all these techniques work well together. You can use multiple of these techniques to build up really beautiful, beautiful patterns. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's start up here, and I'm going to mix a slightly stronger mix. Oh, that's too strong. Of my Quin gold and my purple. Yeah, that's way too purple. Let's get more gold in there. That's better. So I'm looking, and it's got some big, dark sort of patches, and I'm just going to paint those in. I'm not doing exactly the same because, well, I can't be bothered. These patches are a really good way of disguising any slightly irregular outlines or whatever. Now, not all the patches are the same size, all the same dark. Some have light edges to them. Some, oh, I don't know, are more just little dots. We can come back to that. But something to bear in mind is where you've got your highlight. The highlight also refers to the patches of colour. So what I like to do is say put on the colour, and then when it's slightly drier, just pull out a little. We haven't got a really dark patch bang in the middle of the highlighted area. The secret is to make these random. We don't want regular size dots or regular space dots. We could leave areas in the middle of them if we want, and so forth. So that's wet on dry. If we're going to spatter, we don't want it to go into the background, because the whole feel of this painting is about the sort of the cleanness of it and the pattern of it. So what I do is just get an old bit of paper, fold it like that, and then cut an egg shape out. Hopefully, yeah, that's a pretty good size. So now I can mask that area off, load my brush up. I could do some little spatters without getting it, hopefully, anywhere else. Do get it anywhere else, I'll use a damp brush just to lift that. That would be one way of building up a little bit of a pattern. Some of these, you can see some of the markings are a lot softer. They're not really dark like this. So the way I do that is to pre-damp just with clean water. Be gentle because we don't want to disturb that first layer. Again, use my little mask and spatter into the damp, and we'll get slightly diffused marks. And I've just got a bit of grey here. I can let those dry and then maybe do a few little hard spatters. So again, I've got a bit of variation going on. I don't know if you've ever come across Brusho. What it is powdered ink, and it comes from Colourcraft, and it comes in all different colours, and I'm not taking the lid off because the powder, one little speck of it goes everywhere. But the way I find it's good is to put not a safety pin, drawing pin through the lid, and that makes a little hole, and we can then sprinkle it. I've got black Brusho here, and the different colours do behave in different ways, but black Brusho is made up of a little bit of brown, a little bit of orange, a bit of blue, and if we just dampen the surface and then gently tap some of the powder in, it will start to spread out in that damp surface, and you will see these beautiful colours coming out. Now, powder went outside onto the dry. You can just blow it away because it will only stick to a damp surface. If that was too wet, it would really spread out a lot, which isn't what I'm after. If you haven't got Brusho, you can do quite a similar effect with watercolour pencils and a bit of sandpaper. Back to that first one, which is hopefully dry now. I'm going to dampen it with clean water. Yeah, some of that's sort of moving a bit, but that doesn't matter. Again, just make sure we've got that highlight. And then I've chosen, that's a sort of browny, purpley pencil, and it has to be watercolour pencil. And then you can sand the watercolour pencil into the damp wash and you get a really fine little mark. And I think it's quite nice to do a couple of colours. Again, if it's gone on the outside, don't worry. Just blow it. Anything that is on dry will just blow away. Something else you may have noticed on your quail's eggs is that some of them have little white spatters on them. So if you want to do those white spatters or that sort of misting, we could use a tiny bit of gouache and spatter with that. Gouache is basically watercolour that has body to it, so it's opaque. I like to just loosen it up because this is dried up a little, but lift a little out, add a bit of water just till it's say loose, and then I can do exactly what I did before, mask off the area and then just do a few little white spatters. If you have done any colour sanding or with the Brusho, be very careful not to go back in with water. That should be the last thing you do because you'll dissolve it and get rid of all those lovely markings. So now I'm going to carry on painting using a combination of the wet on dry, the wet into wet, the spattering, the Brusho, the colour sanding, bit of gouache, and we'll see what it looks like at the end. There we go, 19 quail eggs. This is your chance, once it's dry, just to do that final tidy up. Just tidy up any edges and make it all beautiful. And it's decision time. Do you want to do any writing? Do you want shadows? Of the writing, I think my favourites are either the ones where it's sort of stuck on, because that looks like the label that you would get in a museum or a display, or I quite like the printing than my handwriting. So now I'm going to mix up a bluey grey shadow colour. Lovely combination is French ultramarine and burnt sienna, or this happens to be Quin sienna. There it's mixed to a dark brown, so I need to add a bit more blue because I want it to be on the bluey end of grey, and I think that's probably about right. And these shadows are not going to be very dark. Let's just look where the shadow is going to be. If I put my little egg, it's going to be, if our light's coming here, and sort of going to be around the back side. If I've got them at an angle, the light is nearer to the front and around. If the angle's there, the shadow is there. I'm just going to keep these as very diffuse shadows. So what I'm going to do is first of all just wet where I reckon the shadow will go and let that sink into the paper. The advantage of that is that we'll get nice soft edges, and if I put it in the wrong place, it doesn't matter. So with my bluey grey mixture, I'm just coming back and putting that shadow where I want it. I don't think I need much more than that. Now you can see that where the water is sitting on the surface, so it's still pretty wet, the colour goes further, and I might not be happy with that. So again, let's move that little egg. I can get my little damp clean brush and control where that shadow is. The shadow to be where I want it, not where it wants to be. Depending how wet it is, I might have to do that a couple of times. Need to, you can always go back and strengthen the shadow. If you're not happy with how dark it is. But do think about softening the edge, because these are just meant to be quite diffused. Make sure your shadow and your highlights actually correspond. So you're happy with those shadows, let them dry, and then just think about our little bits of writing. This is entirely optional. I really like these little stuck on labels, so that's what I'm going to do. And I've just got a scrap of watercolour paper and a nice fine liner. So let's move that. And I'm going to do 3. One is just going to say quail. The other is going to be its Latin name, Colourcraft. And the other bit, this is the label from the eggs, free to fly. Then we simply cut those out, and then we just need to decide where we want to place them, and that's one of the reasons why I like these little stuck on labels, because you can make that decision. I think even if I was going to print this or write this on, I think I'd probably do little ones and work out the placement. Now you can be sneaky, and if there's a blob that you couldn't lift, you can always use this to sort of disguise it. When you're happy, stick them down. I've just got some PVA. Obviously you're allowed to use a brush, but what is the point of getting a brush dirty? And I just like the tiny element of 3D that having it stuck on paper gives to the piece. So a final thought and an option for you. If you wanted to make your eggs shiny, you could. I think they would be really nice contrasting with the matte of the paper. So what you could do is get some brush on gloss varnish and just put it over the egg. But this is a word of warning. If you want to do that over the sanded watercolour pencils or the Brusho, you'll need to fix them first. So use a spray fixative if that's what you want to do. Don't panic that it looks, oops, you see, look, that's moving the watercolour a little bit without that fixative. And I'll just pretend I did that to show you as opposed to by mistake. But if I stop the stripes, we'll be okay. So you can just brush on a little bit of that varnish over just the egg shapes, and that could give you a really nice effect. But don't forget to wash your brush. That's dry. If I just wiggle it around, you can see this egg is shiny and the background isn't. So that could be a really nice effect. Of course, you could do the same exercise but using all different shape and colour eggs. Just get yourself an egg book from the library and you could make an absolutely beautiful picture. If you want to see that, My latest book, which is Painting Birds and Watercolour, is out in July 22, and it's actually got that as one of the chapters. But I hope you've seen how those beautiful eggs make a really lovely subject to paint, and that you can learn about washes, texturing techniques and colour mixing all from one little egg. I hope you've enjoyed this.